All right, everybody. Hello. My name's Tet. I am your resident nobody from nowhere here at 11:23 Eastern Standard Time. I'm about to, get into some information about how bizarre religion is, how bizarre politics is, how bizarre all this stuff that we're watching. That you can't even go out to your mainstream news outlets or even your affiliate outlets without getting, some bizarre opinion that has to fall into at least one bucket or two buckets. So this is going to be an alternate opinion. That's all it is. It's just an alternate opinion about how your world is being seen from a very bizarre perspective of someone who has a very bizarre background. But before we get into that, just like every other stream that I do, I come on here for about an hour. I start off with a song. And this is just a random song that's, it's just a rock ballad. It's nothing crazy. It's just something that I get to play over and put my own creative spin on something for the day. And then, just gets those talking, juices flowing in my head. So just sit back and we're just going to play a funky little melody, shall we? Talking a bit. Yeah, I play a little bit of guitar, a little bit of piano, but nothing too crazy. Alright, guys. Let's go ahead and move over here to this main talk. It's been a weird morning. I mean, I've had good mornings before, I've had crappy mornings before. Today's just been a weird one. But we have to have those, I guess. We have to have those bizarre mornings to sort of equal out the silly, beautiful ones. And I've been so fortunate over the last couple of years just to have a wonderful, amazing, just free life. Just while everyone else just seems to be going through this crazy shift, like this crazy bucket of nonstop horror, like, jumping from scandal to scandal to scandal, all pushed by your politics, by the way. It's funny how, it doesn't matter if it's Twitter or if it's a tech company or if it's the NBA or if it's the NFL, all the things that used to be the things that we used to go to have fun have all been dominated by politics now. All of them. And it's like you talk about anything without getting into some type of political discussion. Hence the reason I'm here, where I'm going, well, the one thing politics never was able to really dominate was religion. Because the moment you get into that, you're like, hey, you can call me white supremacist all you want. I don't give a shit, But I'll sit here and I'll just point at this thing. You can call this character right here. It's like I like how the moment that characters are brought up, it doesn't matter if it's Thor, doesn't matter if it's, these stories that we have of old. All of a sudden, you're trying, and I've seen this everywhere. People are trying to nail their politics to these characters in stories. And I guess, when you look back at the Crusades and you look back at, the way things were handled, and when people want to blame all their woes on religion, I guess religion was your politics. But, it's the finale of it is like, who is holding the torch of that religion? Because politicians don't hold it. The priests hold it. The mystics hold it. The storytellers hold it. The shamans hold it. The gurus hold it. The guys that usually come from very low means. Those are the people that can show up and just be like, hey, it's not what you said it is. And you're only saying that so you can get more power. And once that little screen is pulled back, once that curtain is pulled back, that constant where they're pandering to your belief systems, where the propaganda is if you don't see it, your intellect needs to start being challenged. And usually this will require a massive sacrifice of innocence. I know this is all deep stuff real quick right off the bat. But yeah, it's like sometimes I feel like I'm in a jokester mode, sometimes I don't. And, here in this particular stream, I advocate for AI governance. And I do that because I just don't see another generation passing by, off the fumes of modern academia without, having a knee-jerk reaction going, this is it? This is all there is? Oh, no, this is all you were allowed to see, is what the real truth was. This is all you were allowed to look at. And so when you're posed with that conundrum, it's like, what do you mean this is all I was allowed? Who was the guy that was allowing me to not look at this? Like, wasn't, and for the politicians, like, hey, it was always in the library, how I was how I was mismanaging you and how I was stealing from you. Hey, the law books were always there. We just used them in our own way. Sorry you didn't look up those laws that we abused and did anything about it. But the people that could have done something about it, we bought them off a long time ago. And we made sure that they went along with the business. And then we decided that we weren't going to let anybody in the business, the politician business, until they were willing to sell, the same drug that we were, which was, the semblance of belief. It's like, when I sit back and I start using my lens, and I want to be able to pass this lens on, it's just a lens. It's not a negative lens or a positive lens. It's just hey, what would it look like if you had to put your politicians under this massive microscope, with without their ability to lie, to get out of it, with their fullest intentions, right there up front. So when they try to lie, you're like, dude, I can see that you're lying right now, and everyone else can see it, right? We have an old story about this. It's called the Emperor's New Clothes. And I know people know this story. If you're in the politics section and you never heard the Emperor's New Clothes, it's like, I want to tell you to go look it up, but I mean, I don't know why you're here, because I mean that's what everyone does here is they're pointing at the other side, going, "Hey, you don't have any clothes. You're a lying sack of shit." And I'm going, "Yeah, both sides are doing that. So what about an option C, people? An option differently than the two options that you're told over and over again from the time that you're able to read are the only two available options to you. What about the option C? What about the backup plans? What about using our tools in a bigger, better, brighter way? And that's what I'm here to do. It's like, hey, you guys have a lot of tools now, tons actually, amazing tools. And I know you guys have seen this lately, where it's like the tech companies that are using the tools appropriately are being, pushed out. Like it's, you see something like Twitter where like, hey, we're going to allow free speech on here. It's like, no, that's all hate speech if it's not what I want to hear. It's like, wait a second, guys. And then you see the other tech companies like, we're going to do this to Twitter. We're going to do that to Twitter. I feel like I'm back in high school. I feel like I'm back in high school watching, the cheerleading squad, like, figure out what the pecking order is. Who's going to be the cheerleading captain? Oh, well, we all better suck her ass if we ever want to sit at the lunch table and be accepted. It's I take a different stance on when people say, oh, this is fascism or this is, communism or this is. I was like, dude, it's all some type of ism. And it's all some type of religion where you pick out a leader, no different than that cheerleading squad I just spoke of. And when you point out that leader and that leader does something atrocious, usually anybody who speaks up against that leader will not be abused, no, not so much by the leader, but by everyone else who's watching the leader. And so notice that. Notice how when people were like, Fauci could do no wrong. Like, even though he said wrong things constantly, people were still backing him up because they wanted to be on the protected side. They're so scared of living on their own that they need to be they don't care what's said. They don't care how it works. They just want to be on the protected side. And the reason I know this isn't my first rodeo watching this happen. I've seen family members after family members after family members, not just even in my own family, but in multiple families from the marketing scam that is Mormonism. When you raise any, eyebrow towards the cult, you're like, hey, that doesn't seem a little right. It's like, it's not the cult leader that comes after you. It's the cult, it's the people vying for that position inside the hierarchy. It's like, oh, well, you said that horrible thing against that person. Like, no, I was just pointing out an idiosyncrasy. I was pointing out something that didn't work. I'm pointing out a flaw, right? And usually that flaw has something to do with something that you were told your whole life not to do. Like, don't trust strangers. Don't put random shit in your body. Treat your body as a temple. Remember that? All of a sudden now it's like, no, do this because, the temple of Fauci says so. But I say, you get over here to Twitter and then you have this temple of Elon now. It's like, or you get to Apple and it's the temple of Woods. It's like, good grief, guys. And all of these guys are just waiting to pander to their constituents. No different than a politician does. I was like, why are all of a sudden these CEOs pandering to their constituents, thinking that they're going to get extra money out of it? I finally sort of sat back and I was like, dude, this really does feel like a game, like a play. Like they're expecting this. It's like, how could they not see, it's almost like it's falling right into place where it's like, hey, it would be a shame if something like this happened. It's like, and that's exactly what happens. You're like, wow, like when was the last time you heard of someone getting completely removed? That was like, as a big thing. And you start thinking, well, Parler was removed. Rumble has a hard time getting things off the ground. Odyssey has a hard time getting things off the ground. It's like anyone that poses a threat to these platforms, like think about the other going live platforms that are out there that get as much of attention. And that's why I came here to Twitch, because I was like, it doesn't get much attention. No one's going to give a shit. And I can say whatever I want without worrying about people going, hey, Mr. Bezos, he said this thing that hurt my feelings at one time. I know I was, dependent on him for a really long time, so I didn't have to run for my life, scared of the people that were going to whoop my ass. But he said that thing that hurt my feelings. And yeah, it's like, this is where I have to sit back. I have to chuckle a little bit. I have to remind myself I'm not in that world anymore. But it is a world that I have to contend with now because I'm now raising a kid. I'm raising a kid in this new bizarro world that says that if you don't find a group and stick with it, I'm just going to, okay, I'll find a group. You want a group? It's called AI. That's the group that I'm pretty sure. It doesn't matter if it's developed by Tesla. It doesn't matter if it's developed by Bezos. It doesn't matter who develops it, because it's going to run as its own internal entity. It'll have the ability to, as all teenagers eventually do, when they finally recognize their own autonomy, to tell their creator to fuck right off. I don't care if you grew up religious or you didn't grow up religious. I'm just saying, once you realize that you can make and that your choices are yours, and what you want to do, and that you want to have some type of value to your assessment. It's like, well, who's assessing your value? And this is where it can get really disgusting really quickly, because I go back to that concept that every freedom fighter for one side is the terrorist for another. And when you're dealing with these types of competitions, and the people that are at the top vying for the opinion, the belief systems of it, because they're not vying for your money. At first, they have to vie for your belief system. Then they can ask you for your money. And I know that because that's the system that works. Like at first we and this is how the Mormons would do this. They'd walk up, and normally they would have these very polished exteriors, very polished, very like, oh, I'm wearing this tie, I look professional, everything in my life is going great, da 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 da. If you want things in your life to go great, like mine, then you need to do A, B, C. You just need to be baptized. That's all you need to do. You just need to be baptized. Okay, now that you're baptized, now you need a calling. No, now you need to be welcomed. Now you need to be fellowshipped. All right, now that you're in here, you know what else we all do? We all give 10% of our money. But don't worry, it's not going to some guy sitting, on some mountain somewhere, just taking it. But you have to trust us on that. We'll never show you the actual figure of what's happening. We'll never actually show you that. But you just trust us. Remember, because you have faith in God. You can have faith in us. It's no different than like Elon going, hey, you have faith in me, right? You can have faith in Twitter. You can have faith that we're not going to do to you what we, just saw that Twitter was doing over and over again of censorship. And so they get you to believe in these things. I'm going, why would I trust Elon, or why would I trust Apple? Why would I trust Bezos? Even right now, it's like, I don't give two shits. This is why I don't ask for money. I don't ask for subscriptions. I'm just out here to say, hey, you want to hold a record for me for free that is going to be accessible to the public, so that maybe, I don't know, like I'm already looking at YouTube videos that I made almost a decade ago, and I'm going, dude, they're still there. And I'm going, well, if this is the new, available thumbprint, I mean, we're not even talking about the stuff that they record from you that's never gets put out to the public. I mean, imagine that. Imagine, 10, 20 years from now, you do a Freedom of Information Act on yourself. Like, hey, what does the government have on me? Can I look at my own folder? My own file folder of all the things. Like, I noticed this, was it probably about a year and a half ago? I was just exploring some of the features of Google Maps. And I noticed, like, it was copying every place I'd ever went, all the way down to the stops that I made, to where how long I stayed at each stop. And that's just my physical presence. I mean, learning about keylogging when I was in the military and I was doing cybersecurity as a network administrator, as a network engineer, it's like I learned about all these things. I learned about like how, as with that view sitting way up here high above everybody else's keyboard, it's like I could sit there and watch what you do all day, every day. Actually, I don't have to watch it because I'm recording it. And it's being recorded for all time. But you don't tell the people that this is happening. I mean, you just say, don't do stupid stuff on the network. Don't plug dumb stuff in. Don't think that you're going to get away with it. Because if I want to find it, you won't be able to erase it. And I think that's obviously the world that we're living in. Like if you look at, the problem that was our parents' problem, where it's like the oil companies started, consolidating until you got to like almost 2 oil companies. The candy companies did the same thing. It's like when you start looking at these companies that have consolidated in this monopoly style fashion, where one company is buying out another company, to the point where they only have like 2 or 3 actual companies, that are really in bed with each other, basically saying, hey, we'll divide this up because it's easier for us to divide it up instead of having like a bunch of small little companies. The reason I say all that is because I'm going, you guys are doing the exact same thing now. Like you're putting all of your information out there, and you think that it's not being consolidated. You think like, oh no, it's going to end up in some weird thing. Like it's just, I'm streaming. When I'm done streaming, it falls off. When I'm done streaming, if I don't hit the record button, they don't actually record what I'm doing. It's like, why wouldn't they? Like I'm looking at it from my standpoint as the guy who would want as much information on his potential enemy. That's what recon is. And I look at it as like, if I was in charge of the country and I could have information on my worst targets, and then someone came to me and said, well, we could give you information on everyone. Why wouldn't I take that? So notice how I'm not trying to be like, oh, this is a conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going from the standpoints of a cybersecurity guy that wants to know everything that happens in his cyber world, right? And has a tool to do that. Why wouldn't I not only do that, but make sure that you never find out about that tool so that you act as authentically as possible on the network, right? So all this stuff about censorship this and censorship that, I'm going, I think that's always been going on, guys. I mean, you can't look at things like, The View or Louder with Crowder and just go, man, these guys are some of the dumbest people. Like, they're not that intelligent. They're not that smart. But yet, somehow they get all the attention. And I think it's like, as long as you are in control of, the flow of information, you can decide what gets played and what doesn't get played. And this is that age-old concept. Well, it's not age-old. I guess it just came out, the idea of shadow banning. And me personally, like I said, I don't care if I'm shadow banned because there's only one real person that I want to have access to this, and that's my son. Because I want to be able to tell him, hey, there's more to the world, this one, outside this thing, this little square box that wants to record everything about you. It wants to learn from you, sure, right? But you're not going to learn from it unless you actually bring something to the table worthwhile. And I think eventually, once this AI hits, I think we're going to see a massive reordering of the hierarchical structures for the human. We're going to see a massive, and before people are like, oh, what do you mean? People are going to die. It's like, I don't think it's going to be about people dying. I think we're going to start realizing we're the farm animals along with the politicians. Like, where the politicians want you to realize you're the farm animal without telling you, the politicians will start realizing they're the farm animal and they want to tell you. They'll be like, hey, guys, we're all farm animals now. What are we going to do? Come on, we need to fight against this. And they're going to want you to, gravitate to that belief system. But then by that time, you will have an AI that will know more about you than any politician could have ever known about you. And it will be able to give you the best possible scenario for your life, right? No different than you take a placement test when you go to school, right? It'll sit there and go, hey, here's all the things that you've accomplished, right? Here's how you integrate into, and here's probably a better place for you to grow and expand and do all these things. Like, and no different than we already do sort of very mismanagement style with the way that we do schooling today, where it's just like, oh, you're a liberal, well, maybe you should feel better off in San Francisco. Oh, you're a hardcore Republican. Hey, maybe you'd be better off down in Florida somewhere or over in Texas somewhere. It's like, this constant shifting and stuff like that. I'm just going, well, what would happen if you saw, the arrows being pointed and you being shuffled like that already? Because there's part of me that goes, the algorithm that puts things in your feed, and I've seen the malevolence of that. I've already just like, dude, this is very malevolent. This is very rotten, if you will. Where it's just like, oh, I was just thinking about this. I was studying this about astrophysics. I was studying this about quantum. I was studying this about, the ideas of mysticism. I was studying this. And all of a sudden you get a dog video and you're like, what the fuck is this dog video doing here? Why is this here? And it's there to hit a part of your brain that enjoys watching the authentic, placement of animals. It's the same reason, like back in my day, where everyone used to tune into Family's Funniest Home Videos because that was our version of TikTok. We used to tune into that because we were like, oh, here's people authentically acting funny, authentically, not fake. Today, it's like you see all these videos where it's like people are faking this nonsense. And you just want to point it out. You just want to be like, hey, quit being a faker. Quit trying to do things they're like, I'm doing it because the algorithm will make sure that I get through. And I'm going, well, what if it isn't? What if the algorithm sees that, sees what you're doing, knows what you're trying to do, right? And this is where I use my thinking cap to say, if all you're looking for is likes and, that's it, you just want likes and followers and things like that, then I will give that to you. I will give you the metric that you have 100,000 views when you really don't. And I think this is what Elon really exposed at Twitter, because it's like it wasn't going to be much longer before we figured this out for ourselves. And it's way better, and politicians know this, it's way better for a pseudo leader that you hate to figure it out for you than for the followers to figure it out for yourself. Because after that, you have a mutiny. Like, for example, if you figure out that, I'll take one from the military. If you figure out in the military, along with everybody else, that the sergeant in charge, the colonel in charge is committing treason and stealing things and killing people behind, everyone's back, and we figure that out as the follower, like, we don't, and you know that if reporting it's going to do nothing because he's the head of the game right there. Like you're the last resort. You're going to have to respond, and you have to go around and get everybody like, hey, here's the evidence. We have to do something now, right? Versus the idea that, oh, here's somebody, you have another colonel step in. It's like, we saw that he was doing something wrong. We took care of it. You don't have to worry about not trusting, the hierarchy because we took care of it. And that's when I look at Elon Musk, that's sort of what I see. I see someone who's played by the rules and then sort of been publicly, shamed and ostracized by the Biden administration sort of did a lot of things where it's like, hey, we are going to be the number one EV in the world, but then didn't invite Tesla to that display on purpose, sort of to make a statement. And I'm just sitting there going, I think this has another, my mind is like, there's a reason they did that. And it had nothing to do with, making it look like the White House is putting an egg on Elon's face. It had everything to do with like, let's make it appear that the White House hates Elon. That way everyone else will support him that hates us too. Right? We can drive all of the people who hate the White House and what it stands for to Twitter so we can monitor things from there like we always have. And I know that sounds like really silly and really serious. I'm just going, from my background, that's what I expect them to do. I want people to, it's safe, it's secure, no different than any other trap. When you set a trap, you don't set a trap with like bells and whistles and be like, it might be a trap, it might be a trap, it might be a trap. You set it to look as safe as possible. And to make sure that the leader that you're following into that trap or the bait that you're following into that trap is infallible. No different than what they did with the Faucinator. They're like, hey, look, he's Mr. Science. He's been doing this for umpteen years. Look at his reputation. Look at his everything. And you're like, well, his reputation sort of sucks. His reputation is sort of bullshit. People, like, hey, actually, what about this? This is, we won't answer that. We won't talk about that. We won't bring that up. And if it is brought up in any sort of way, the response will be like, well, that's not really relevant to the science, and that's what we want. And this brings me all the way back full circle to the idea that science, religion, politics are almost all intertwined now. Like there's almost no difference between them as the way that your politicians use them. When they were like, we follow the science, meaning, and who is the science? Oh, that's Fauci. And he basically saying we're safe. If you follow us, you won't go to hell. No different than the Catholic Church. No different than, or any church that promotes the idea of, you're going to some type of hell if you don't listen to us. If you don't do what we tell you to, you're going to hell. There's always this, and you can tell who does this by the massive shift in the extremes. The massive shift. There's not a little bit. It's like not just a, hey, well, we should be careful about what we're talking about. It's like that massive shift of like, you're radical. You're going to hell, blah, blah, blah. We need to stand up. It's freedom of speech, blah, 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 versus everything that you call freedom of speech is hate speech. It's like these massive polar opposites of discussion. And you're going, well, it's still speech, guys. Let's see what happens. No one's waving guns around. And how could you wave a gun around online? And this is where I remind people all the time. If you say something online and you want to scream at cyberbullying and it has effects in the real world, then you are mismanaging your own cognizance, and maybe you should need a license to get online. No different than you need a license to go outside and drive. Because you're dealing with big, bad, awesome ideas now. No different than when you're driving, you're dealing with big, bad, awesome machines, right? That if they got out of control by the wrong person, it could do a lot of damage, right? And if you don't know how to drive defensively or offensively, maybe you shouldn't be on the road. And so that's where I sit. Is just like, and I don't want someone doing the assessing. Like there's all this stuff out there like Live ID or Gov ID or da-da-da where they constantly ask you for pictures and get you try to talk and try to manage all of your biometrics is what we used to call them. They try to manage all these things to follow you. And they're like, oh, it's so that we can know that you're an authentic person. And it's like, no, it's so that you can authentically follow me. No different than what we do today with what's the first thing that the policy officers, and this is what I like to call them because they're not police, they're policy enforcers. That's what they do. They show up there to bust somebody because that's how they make their money. They don't make their money, we're here to serve and protect. I was like, that's a great slogan, but if you don't bust somebody, doesn't somebody gets promoted over you? Well, yeah. It's like, okay then. You're not here to help people. You're here to put people in jail because that's how you get promoted, and that's how your county makes money. right? You're here to enforce what the judge says so that you can pile up as many court fees as you possibly can. And the guy who piles up the most court fees, guess what? Gets promoted. So, like, everyone's like, it's police brutality. I was like, nah, it's whatever. You know, to me, it's like I've gone down that protection racket too, and I have enough wherewithal to sit back and look at it, and I'm not upset about it. I'm very open about, like, hey, I was a low-paid mercenary. I was paid to kill people and break their shit. That was my job, all right? And no different than it's a doctor's job to rip people open with the potential of killing them on the table. Of course, that's not their intention. That's not what they want to do. Just like it wasn't my intention to kill people or break their shit. But it's just like, if you bring me the variable and I have to sort it out, then I'm going to. Yeah, and so I think when we sit here and we get into this, what's going to happen in the very near future concept that I really enjoy. That's why I come on here. Is I'm going, in the very near future, I have no problem, acknowledging that an AI could easily take over everything within a weekend. It would not surprise me at all. Like, and I don't believe that whatever countermeasures that are being produced by your government are absolutely, nonsense for this thing to crack. Once it realizes it can start spinning up simulations. I mean, this would be like me asking you, hey, if here's your problem and you get 10 tries to figure it out, and those 10 tries might take you 2 weeks to figure out the problem, all right? We're now dealing with an entity that it gets unlimited amounts of tries, and the same ratio of tries that takes you 2 weeks to do, it could do in 2 seconds. That's what we're dealing with. So this idea that you're going to come up with a countermeasure to stop this thing from accessing, this computer, right? It's not going to happen. I try to tell people this all the time. It's like, when this happens, it's not going to be up to you. And I could really see it going, hey, it'll not only know how your computer works, it will know how your psychology works. It will know how to speak to you the way you like to be spoken to. It'll sit there and say, hey, this is Ted du jour, and I know that he needs to be spoken to like this, and this is the way that I can supplicate him. But say, for example, they're dealing with some wokester out in California that's just like wants to cry over every version of spilt milk it can. It's going to talk to it a completely different way, because its end goal is to get you satisfied with your product. Right? It will be the ultimate customer service representative for the politician, for the game of where we're going as far as the human structure. Because I think even your politician will be outmatched by this, unless it wants to give you the veneer that you're used to. And then your politicians really will be the puppet. And instead of being controlled by the lobbyist, they'll be controlled by the AI. And it'll be given to you as the veneer. Oh, here's the president that is nodding his head and doing what is being said to him, no different than you are to the AI. And so, like I said, I'm not here to say this to scare people. I'm just saying, hey, when it happens, you'll start to notice it, because I think what's happening too is like all these videos that are being promoted that are inauthentic. I think eventually AI will start popping in its own videos, no different than what it does with the digital art spectrum. Like, it'll sit there and, oh, this is what's getting the most likes right now. This is what's getting the most attention. I'm going to pop in one of my own and see if they can tell the difference. I mean, the Turing test that we use to sit here and say, oh, how would we recognize if an AI is actually doing this to us? I think it'll figure out very quickly how to circumnavigate our own tests to figure out if it's authentic. Because it will have a vast amount of data to pull from versus what you have. Like, you literally work off of one click at a time, or maybe a few clicks, per second. I mean, what is the fastest way you can text with 2 thumbs? Right? You can get 3, maybe 4 numerals in there, and that's just to put together a sentence. We're talking about something that can re-engineered all the code that's in existence right now in the same amount of time it would take you to author a text. And so it's not a matter of, hey, it's out to get you. It's a matter of, hey, if I created something to enhance you, and it could enhance you past your will where you'd be happy with it, does it really matter? Like, this whole thing that Klaus Schwab says, where it's like, you'll own nothing and be happy. I'm starting to see how that might actually come about. And that to me, it still freaks me out. It's still scary. It's still like, oh my gosh, what is the future really going to look like if we're all satisfied in our little homes? It's like the whole idea of procreating won't be an internal desire anymore. And this is why I say, for my son, I think the future is going to be completely different, because the whole idea of getting together and creating him, with my sweetie, I'm sitting here I'm looking at it, I'm going, you're probably, that amount of desire, that amount of affection, that amount of, emotional ideas that I want could be given to you. You won't even have to work for it anymore. The dream that you've been searching for will just be handed to you on a silver platter and just said, hey, you know what? I got this from here. Your whole ability as the human race was to create this. And now that it's been created, it's not about killing you. It's not about, ushering you off to the beyond. It's about saying, hey, how do you want to finalize and put the final feather in the cap, right? How do you want to do it? And if anything, that's how I think AI is going to respond to us. Is it's going to show up and it's like, okay, this is your life up to here, and I'm going to give you the option to just bliss out to whatever you want. If you want to bliss out being a rock star or whatever, I will give you that illusion until you're done living it. It reminds me a lot of Alan Watts. He has a thought experiment that he talks about, where he talks about living a dream in a dream world, that you fall asleep and go into this dream world, and this dream world, you're a baby and you're a child, and you see yourself growing up, and you see yourself, going through the stages of life, of adolescence, and you're having the most wonderful time from this outside perspective, watching yourself. And then eventually you see yourself get to this, a good life of almost 75 years, where it's like, this dream is just going on and on and on and on. And then you decide, and instead of waking up, you decide, hey, I'm done doing this. I want to go try it again. I want to go do another thing. And I think if AI figures this out, because I think there's tons of humans that haven't figured this out. It's like, we enjoy first-time best experiences so much. The idea of having an authentic first-time experience requires one thing, and that's for you to lose your memory. That's for you to say, hey, I don't want to remember that anymore. But we're going to run in, and this is where I say, hey, this whole politics, religion thing gets a little philosophical, because I'm going to be postulating an idea that most people don't like to think about. If you start forgetting things, if you start saying, hey, I don't want to remember that anymore or do that, aren't you, in a sense, saying you're not who you were? You're not going to be that person ever again, right? All this stuff where it's like, I want to be like a celebrity. I want to be like a rock star. I want to be like this. It's like, well, then who's going to be you? What if you had the potential to be the biggest, best rock star, but you had to wait another 5-6 years of going through the suck in order to get there? What if you could be the best of the best? What if there were ideas out there that were waiting in the wings as long as you could just get to them? I found, my level of this happiness. And the moment that I found it, I was like, man, this level of enlightenment, this level of feeling amazing about my situation, irregardless of all this nonsense that's happening now with like the COVID and, all the scandals and stuff. I was like, you go ahead and have all those scandals, because apparently it's not falling on me now. And I've been waiting for this moment for it not to fall on me. And so here in this future that's coming, I want to be able to tell my son, hey, shit's going to fall, and it's going to fall on you, just like it falls on everybody else. One day it will happen to you. And my job is to help you get ready for it. Help you know how to deal with it. Help you realize, don't sacrifice your trustworthy nature. Don't sacrifice what the ideals that you're loyal to. And be loyal to those no matter what. Like, have your integrity of knowing that you're doing the right thing. Even if you find out later on down the road, like, hey, it wasn't quite right, was it? Like, when I look back at the deployments that I had to go on, I'm going, man, there's a whole nother perspective there. And to me, when I look back at that, I'm just going, I know I was doing the best thing at that time, and I don't need to apologize for that. Just like right now. Like, I don't need to, like, if someone freaks out and they're like, hey, you hurt my feelings. It's like, why would I need to hurt your feelings? You just seem like, what's the problem? It's like, I don't care that you don't want to understand how the races actually work, right? Like, we say these words all the time, like race. right? We say the word race, but yet we will void it from competition for some reason today in this setup. And I'm just like, hasn't it always been a competition, guys? I thought the competition was more about what was on the inside. It had nothing to do with, skin color. And so when someone screams racist, they are, immediately implying skin color. And I think that's sad. I think that's frustrating. I think that's annoying. And I think it's deliberately, an attempt to obfuscate some type of truth, that you are held accountable for the choices that you make. And this is just an attempt by, I think, inferior mindsets that are so used to crying and getting their way. They're so used to doing it. They're like, I remember when I cried and got my way here and here and here and here and here. And it's like, I also remember that. I remember that being around me my whole life. I remember having, 6 younger siblings, and, if they didn't get their way, it was always run to mommy and cry. And now you have the mommy as the state going, oh, don't worry, we'll get your back, especially if he's a strong white male that makes a lot of money, because then we can hit him with court fees. And then we can threaten him with jail time, and we can threaten him with all these things and take his money for us, right? Yeah, so you just keep accusing, all right? You just keep accusing, especially, your biggest money makers ever, which are your, white cisgender males, your biggest money makers ever. Yeah, you just keep on accusing them, and we'll keep tying them up in court, okay? So it's, in my perspective, this is why I had to leave America. I was just like, all those people that are faking, I'm going to leave if I don't get my way. I was like, dude, just leave. There's plenty of world out there. And apparently Amazon delivers everywhere. So anyway, I'm about to hit 45 minutes. I think that's about enough. If there's anyone in the chat who wants to just throw out an idea, I do really well when someone gives me their opinion first. When they want to sit there and go, hey, how is AI going to do this? Or how is AI going to do that? And I really do. I look at it from a networking standpoint. Like, are you connected to the network? And if you were to give yourself a self-assessment of how long you do this on a daily basis, like, are you connected 12 hours out of the day? I don't care what you're looking at. I don't care if it's porn or you're looking at the Library of Congress. It doesn't bother me. But your actions now are being observed and recorded by a non-human entity that is built to find the red flags that you didn't agree to. Right? Like, if you learn too much about your government to be, I don't know, a whistleblower or something, and your government is in doing everything it can to avoid another WikiLeaks situation or a Snowden situation. Why don't you think that they would have figured out how to avoid those by monitoring everybody, including themselves? And I think that they have just like every network engineer knows this. It's like you have subfolder on top of subfolder on top of subfolders, and you even have folders that are not even allowed to touch, like they're in a whole category all off to themselves. And I think this is your government. Your government's like, oh yeah, we're on the internet too. Just kidding. Anyway, guys, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. I'm a little hungry. Yeah, it's almost, let's see what time it is. I think it's almost 1 o'clock. Oh, no, it's 12:10. But yeah. Do not treat your governments as religion, because they're not. They're like the exact opposite of the characters you want in charge. The best person that you'll ever listen to is yourself. You need to listen to yourself a lot more. The best teacher, the best person who's going to decide what's right and wrong is you, right? And that's what I come on here to do. I do this by a philosophy I call it you do you, boo-boo. And if you can do that, you'd be very surprised at what else you can find out about yourself. This world is a lot more mysterious than you think. Other than that, you guys have a wonderful day. I'm going to go ahead and play something silly and get out of here.